Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cassandra Taylor, and I am the founder and CEO of Top Flight Defense Incorporated, nonprofit organization created by women veterans for all women. This evening, we are going to start our session on caring the caregiver's support guide to self-care and empowerment. We bring to you today Ms. Kimberly Dean, the founder and CEO of Raising Raisins
It's a tongue
LLC.
twister.
Yes, it is. All right, and Kimberly, go right ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our Zoom and our Facebook Live. This is Caring and Coping, the Caregiver Support Guide to Self-Care and Empowerment. Just going to give a little bit of brief history on Raising Raisins. Raising Raisins was founded in 2014, and it started just as a conversation among friends that who were caring for their parents. And it started more so just as friends helping other friends through difficult times of caring for parents that were experiencing and showing signs of dementia, probably had or maybe had a cancer diagnosis, other health issues that their family members and parents were going through, and they needed support. So we started Raising Raisins just as a Facebook support group, just as a conversation among friends. And here we are 8 years later. It has grown to an LLC. It started out with 27 people in our support group. We now have almost close to 400 people in the support group. So that just goes to show that caregivers and support is something that is definitely needed in our community. It is definitely something that is not talked about. It is definitely something that is not, it's often kept secret. It's often kept quiet about the specific needs that your parents need. Care, don't tell anybody, but at the same time, don't put Big Mama in a home. Don't put her away. Make sure that you take care of her. But there was never a playbook on how to care for someone. So Raising Raisins stands for Resources Aligning Impactful, Steadfast Information Nurturing Growth, while raising awareness and services invested in networking and support. I have over 20 years experience working in the not-for-profit and health insurance field. I began my career as a life skills instructor for Jane Addams Hull House, teaching others how to get back into the workforce. During my time there, I was then promoted to program manager for the senior program, implementing programs for seniors in the community. So my experience with working with seniors and working in not-for-profit pretty much have set me up to be, I would say, a subject matter expert when it comes to talking about caregivers and caregiver support. I did a lot of work with caregivers when I worked in the healthcare field. And what I saw when I would go visit my members and the caregivers that were there, I saw a lot of fatigue. I saw burnout. I saw stress. I saw worry. And because there was no plan. They didn't have a plan in place for what happens with them while they're caring for someone else. I hold a bachelor's in sociology and I hold a master's in human services administration. I use my experience as a case manager when I worked for Aetna Insurance to help those in need to obtain services and resources in the home where they feel safe and secure. That's one of the most important things about when you're caring for someone. Most people, and statistics show that people fare better with healing when they are being cared for in their own home. As a result of my work experience, I saw the need to help others who were caring for loved ones. And that's how we actually started Raising Raisins. These two people are my why. This is my mom and dad, and they are the reason for Raising Raisins. I actually left my job, my full-time job at the time. I left my job working with Aetna to stay home full-time to care for both of my parents until they both transitioned. They are the reason for the group. They are the reason that I am very passionate about working with caregivers and getting them to understand the importance of implementing things, putting things in place, estate planning, and different things that are going to help them long-term.
Oh, Regina. Yay.
Raising Raisins is a beacon of light in the community for caregivers to show them that they are not alone on their journey for caring for their loved ones. And with faith, love, compassion, and support, they can continue to be excellent caregivers for their loved ones. So I have this saying, and I always tell people, worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. And I say that because you can't be any good to anyone else if you aren't taking care of yourself. So if you know on an airplane, the oxygen mask drops, what do? The first rule of thumb is to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you assist anyone else. And only when you are able to help yourself first can you effectively help other people. Essentially, caring for yourself is one of the most important and one of the most often forgotten things to do as a caregiver. When your needs are taken care of, the people you care for benefit too. Trying to move this. Here we go. Older caregivers are not the only ones who put their health and well-being at risk. Baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials have assumed the caregiver role for parents. So I would consider myself, and just kind of maybe stop and think about your age group and where you kind of fit. I fit into what is known as Gen X. And so we're kind of in between, and we're the sandwich generation. So we're, while we're taking care of our parents, we're still also taking care of our children as well. And so we are often met with sleep deprivation, poor eating habits, failure to exercise, failure to stay in bed when ill, and postponement of the failure to make medical appointments for yourself. When those things happen, what happens is we're setting ourselves up for health risks, diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, anxiety. All of those things are set up in our bodies when we don't take care of ourselves. And so one of the importance and the thing about being a caregiver and all of these bullet points is that it doesn't mean, regardless of your age, your sex, your race, your ethnicity, all of these things can affect everyone. So it's not just, a Black thing, a white thing, or an Asian. It affects everyone if they're not taking care of themselves. So taking care of yourself is so important as a caregiver. As I was stating before, essentially family caregivers are also at increased risk for depression and excessive use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. So a lot of times people self-medicate when they just don't know what to do. So you start drinking more, you start smoking, or you start eating foods out of comfort because that's your way of coping and dealing with stress. And so on the other hand, caring for a family member demonstrates love and commitment and can be a very rewarding personal experience. However, the exhaustion and the worry and inadequate resources and continuous care demands are enormously stressful. Caregivers are more likely to have chronic illnesses than non-caregivers, namely high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and a tendency to be overweight. Studies show that an estimated 46% to 59% of caregivers are clinically depressed. So just stopping here for a minute, just, really wanting to share, some real life stories. I know two people, I was very close to two people that was caring for their elderly parents. And subsequently, at that point, they both passed. One passed before their parent did, and one just recently passed, almost a year to date after her mother passed. And the thing about it is so important is making sure that you are staying on top of your health, making sure that you are keeping those commitments to going to the doctor, making sure that you are exercising and putting some things in place that are going to be helpful to you. Because oftentimes caregivers, due to burnout and exhaustion and not following through with doctor's appointments, they are likely to pass before the person that they're caring for. Taking responsibility for your own care. As a caregiver, you cannot stop the impact of a chronic or progressive illness or debilitating injury from happening to someone you care for. But there is a great deal for you to do to take responsibility for your personal well-being and to get your own needs met. Self-care is essential to being an effective caregiver. So you can't stop the dementia from coming. You can't stop the cancer from forming. You can't stop the Parkinson's. You can't stop any chronic diseases from forming in your loved one. But what you can do is mitigate the crisis beforehand, before it happening to you, by taking care of yourself, by exercising, by eating properly, by reducing alcohol consumption. So these are things that is really important in terms of taking care of the responsibility for your own care. Because if you're taking care of someone else, then that means that there's potentially no one there to take care of you. So you have to be that person that takes care of themselves. What are your personal barriers? As a caregiver, you often put the needs of the person you're caring for above yourself, neglecting your own health in order to tend to the needs of others. Identifying the reasons you are not putting your needs first will help you move towards putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. So just stop and think for a minute. What are some personal barriers that you have that are preventing you from taking care of yourself first, from putting the oxygen mask on yourself first? What is stopping you from exercising, even if it's getting out for a walk for 15 minutes? What's stopping you from eating healthy instead of stopping, to get something fast on the way home, preparing a meal? Understanding that caregiving is exhausting, and oftentimes, and I could just say this for myself, I was starting to get burnt out with cooking. I cooked for both my mom and dad, and I was cooking breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. I was going to the pharmacy. I was picking up medication. I was taking them both to doctor's appointments. I got to a point where I started taking them to the same doctor, and I scheduled appointments on the same day. But during that time, I also had to make sure that I was getting up at 3:45 in the morning and I was going to exercise. And I know that's but that was my time for myself that I had to steal in order to take care of myself. So just stop and think, like, what are some of your personal barriers that are preventing you from taking care of yourself? So right here, maybe just kind of take a minute. We'll just spend a minute, like, what are your barriers? And take a minute to think about and maybe write down the barriers to your self-care. What are some of the reasons you are not putting yourself first? Do you think that you're being selfish if you put your needs first? Is it frightening to think of your own needs? What is the fear about? Do you have trouble asking for what you need? Do you feel inadequate if you ask for help? Or do you feel, do you feel you have to be prone, that you're worthy of the care recipient's affection? Do you do too much as a result? So just think for a minute, like, what are some of your barriers? Once you're able to identify your barriers, you can start to take those personal barriers to be good to yourself. You begin to change your behavior, moving forward one small step at a time. And on our next slide, we'll talk about the 6 effective tools for self-care that can start you on your way. And so those are some things that even I had to identify for myself. It's like, okay, so what do I need outside of exercising? I need to be able to be social. I need to be able to socialize with my peers. I need to be able to go out. I need to be able to just have a little time to myself, because if you don't have that, it is exhausting, and caregiver burnout is real. And if you don't do those things to take care of yourself, you are setting yourself up to be high risk. So tool number 1, reducing personal stress. I know this is small, so I don't know if you all can see this or not. How we perceive and respond to an event is a significant factor in how we adjust and cope with it. The stress you feel is not only the result of your caregiving situation,
Kimberly,
but yes.
Can I stop you 1 second?
Yes.
Down on your bottom screen where you see notes and all of those icons down there, if you hit that one screen that looks like a projector, that will bring it up and it will take over the whole screen. And all you have to do is hit the enter bar, and that way we'll be able to see it much clearer.
Okay.
Down at the bottom where the volume, where you see the 63%, yeah, right there, it should be like that projection screen. Do you see it at the bottom?
I don't.
Okay, down at the bottom where you see the percentage, 63%, that scale at the bottom of your screen. Do you see that? At the bottom part, you're up top. Yeah, down at the bottom. You see the word notes? Okay, so no, don't move that. Right next to it, it's an icon of a projection screen. Right there. If you click on there, then all you have to do is hit enter, and I can see it better. I'm not sure if anyone else can, but we'll be able to, I can read it much better now.
Okay, is everyone able to see that now?
Everyone is muted, but I can. I'm getting thumbs up next to their name.
Okay.
So we're good. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Now I got to get back to the first slide. There we go. How we perceive and respond to an event is a significant factor in how we adjust and cope with it. The stress that you feel is not only the result of your caregiving situation, but also the result of your perception of it. Whether you see the glass as half full or half empty, it is important to remember that you are not alone in your experiences. One of the things about Raising Raisins is that, and I tell everyone when they join the group that it is a safe place. It is a place where you can come and you can share your feelings, your thoughts, your ideas. You can share those things that other people just don't understand if they're not caregivers. And so that's part of the reason for the caregiver support group. Your level of stress is influenced by many factors, including the following: whether your caregiving is voluntary. Did you decide to do it? Were you okay with moving in with your parents, or your parents moving in with you? If you feel you had no choice in taking on the responsibility, the chances are great that you will experience strain, distress, and resentment. Your relationship with the care recipient. Sometimes people care for another with the hope of healing a relationship. If healing does not occur, you may feel regret and discouragement. Your coping abilities. How you coped with stress in the past predicts how you will cope now. Identify your current coping strengths so that you can build on them. Your caregiving situation. Some caregiving situations are more stressful than others. For example, caring for a person with dementia is often more stressful than caring for someone with a physical limitation, and whether or not support is available. So I'm going to stop right here for a second. When my dad was diagnosed with dementia in 2014, and I would say probably for 2 years after his initial diagnosis, he was fine. And then all of a sudden he started changing. I could see the difference. And so we had to stop him from driving. But because we had to stop him from driving, that was a stressful situation, because he did not want to stop driving. He wanted to continue to drive. So I had to go to his doctor. I had to have his license. I had to have his license revoked. And then I ended up eventually having to sell the car. But during that time, I kind of breezed through that, scenario. But that was a very stressful time, because that actually went on for a period of years. When we finally just had to just say no more. He ended up getting lost when he was driving with dementia. So caring for someone with dementia is extremely, extremely stressful. Setting goals. Setting goals or deciding what you would like to accomplish in the next 3 to 6 months is an important tool for taking care of yourself. And here's some sample goals you might set. Take a break from caregiving. They have respite services. The Department on Aging has respite services and resources available for caregivers. If you would like to take a vacation, you can reach out to one of the respite agencies, and you can talk to the respite agencies about how you can set up time to take a break. And oftentimes, depending on the person's insurance situation, they may be able to have that covered. Get help with caregiving tasks like bathing and preparing meals. The age of COVID has really changed so many things. And so whereas before it was a lot easier, a lot simpler to get someone to come into the home to actually help you perform those tasks of bathing and preparing meals, COVID kind of limited that possibility now. There are a lot of people that are scrambling and looking for caregivers to help them in the home. I know that right before my father passed, we did have someone, and she was phenomenal with my dad, and she took care of my dad until he passed. And then right at the time that she came and she took care of my mom as well, but then COVID took over. And so she wasn't able to come into the home. And so that put more stress and strain on my daughter and myself, who essentially had to take turns taking care of my mom. My dad had passed. Engage in activities that will make you feel more healthy. Exercising, whatever that looks like for you. If it's swimming, bike riding, walking. Walking is very low impact, and it's something that it can be done very easily. Whatever that looks like, engaging in activities that will make you feel healthy, preparing a healthy meal, changing just one thing, something that is reducing your stress level. We're more likely to reach a goal if we break it down into smaller action steps, making an action plan by deciding which step you will take first and then get started. Make an appointment for a physical checkup. I go see my doctor every 3 months because my mother had diabetes. I also have to make sure, and I have to monitor and make sure that I'm keeping those numbers low. So I make an appointment every 3 months to get my A1C checked. Take a half-hour break once during the week. And so if you are a person like me, I work from home. And although I work from home, there are times where I just have to get up from the computer and I have to walk away. And so whatever that looks like, take a half-hour break. And if you're at home and you're caregiving, take a break, go to your room or take a walk, but do something for yourself. And then walk 3 times a week for 10 minutes. It makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. Tool number 3, communicating constructively. Being able to communicate constructively is a caregiver's most important tool. When you communicate in ways that are clear, assertive, and constructive, you will be heard and get the help and support that you need. Tool 4, asking for and accepting help. So in the first slide in number 3, it was being able to effectively communicate. Well, once you effectively communicate and people say, okay, we'll help you, then you have to be willing to relinquish that grip of wanting to fix everything. One of the things that I noticed that people would often say, well, I can come over and help. And I'm like, no, that's okay. I have it. I'm good. I'm all right. And then 2 days later, I'm in my room crying, I don't have any help. But it's like God sends you the help that you need and you tell him, no, you don't want it. So when people ask you if they can help you, and like it says, thank you, but I'm fine. Many caregivers don't know how to accept the goodwill of others and are reluctant to ask for help. You may not wish to burden others or admit that you can't handle everything yourself. And I think for me, I learned, and it really honestly wasn't until after both of my parents passed that I could not really handle everything myself. That it is a huge undertaking to take on caring for someone. And if you are not prepared for it, which oftentimes you're not, you don't really understand the undertaking that it goes into caring for someone's every need from the time that they wake up, from the time they go to bed. Be prepared with a mental list of ways that others could help you. For example, someone could take the person you care for on a 15-minute walk a couple of times a week. Your neighbor could pick up a few things for you at a grocery store, or a relative could fill out some insurance papers. When you break down the jobs into very simple tasks, it's easier for many people to help, and they do want to help. It's up to you to tell them how. Well, let me just say this. In our community, we're not going to let anybody come in and fill out insurance papers. We're not going to do it. We're going to do it ourselves. And more than likely, our parents are not going to allow that. I know that a lot of people say, well, I know I need help, but my mother won't let anybody come in the house. She doesn't want anybody here. And one of the things that I would say as a caregiver is you have to be assertive and you have to say to your parents, and respectfully, the caregiver is for me. The person coming in to help is coming to help me. And if that person is coming in to help me, I can effectively help you better. And then help comes from community resources, family, friends, and professionals. Ask them. Don't wait until you are overwhelmed and exhausted or your health fails. Reaching out for help when you need it is a sign of personal strength. Number 5, talking to your physician. In addition to one household, in addition to taking on the household chores, shopping, transportation, and personal care, 37% of caregivers also administer medications, injections, and medical treatments to the person that they care for. I was fixing 2 pill boxes. I was fixing one for my mother, and I was fixing one for my father. My mother, although she was diabetic, she was not taking injections, but she took pills, and I was filling pill boxes weeks at a time, ahead of time. So that way, every 7 days, I'm back, back at it again. So 77% of those caregivers report the need to ask for advice about the medications and medical treatments. The person they usually turn to is their physician. One of the things I also talk to my caregivers about, and I share with the caregivers, is writing down the medications that your loved one is taking, making sure that you write down not only the name of the medication, the frequency that they take the medication, the dosage in which they take the medication. Write it down in a booklet, but then also write it down and take it and put it on your refrigerator. So in the event of an emergency and someone comes in and asks, or the paramedics come in and they say, do you have a list or do you have the medications? You have that prepared. I can't tell you how many times the paramedics would come, for an emergency at my home for my parents, and the list was already prepared, and all they had to do was take the list, write it down. And so those are just some tips about making sure you have the medications. Caregivers will discuss with their loved ones, with the physician. Caregivers seldom talk. Oh my goodness, sorry guys. They seldom talk about their own health, which is equally important. Building a partnership with a physician that addresses the health needs of the care recipient and the caregiver is crucial. Do you have a primary care doctor, that someone that you can talk to that you trust? The responsibility of this partnership ideally is shared between you, the caregiver, the physician, and other healthcare staff. However, it will often fall to you to be assertive, use good communication skills to ensure that everyone's needs are met, including your own. So for me, what I started doing as a caregiver is I started going to the same doctor my parents went to. And the reason I did that is everybody could go to the doctor at the same time, and I was on roller skates. So the doctor would see me, and then he would go into the room, and then he would see my dad, or then he would go into the room and he would see my mom. But it's important to make those, nuances, those little changes of things that are going to make it easier for you to be an effective caregiver. And tool number 6, start exercising. I can't stress that enough, is exercising. Even though it's one of the healthiest things you can do, you think that it's physical exercise might harm you, or it's only for people who are young and are able to do things like jogging. No, it's not. Fortunately, research suggests that you can maintain or at least partly restore endurance, balance, strength, and flexibility through everyday physical activities like walking and gardening. Another thing that's good and is low impact on the joints is yoga, as well as swimming. Swimming, if you know how to swim, is good. The key is to increase your physical activity by exercising and using your own muscle power. Exercise promotes better sleep, reduces tension and depression, and increases energy and alertness. If finding time for exercise is a problem, incorporate it into your daily activity. Perhaps the care recipient can walk or do stretching exercises with you. My mom had a physical therapist that would come to the house, and she would take her out and she would walk with her. And so one of the things that I would do is when she would take her out to walk, I would walk behind them. So not only is my mother getting physical activity, but I'm also getting physical activity as well. And again, walking is one of the easiest and best exercises. It's a great way to get started. And the benefits from walking are phenomenal to help reduce your stress and tension. And then the thing about exercising is that it creates those feel-good endorphins. And so if you are a person that struggles with anxiety or depression, exercising is a great tool. So in summary, it's not selfish to focus on your needs and desires when you are a caregiver. It's an important part of the job. You are responsible for your own care. Learn and use stress reduction techniques, meditation, prayer, yoga, Tai Chi. Attend to your own healthcare needs. Get proper rest and nutrition. Exercise regularly, even if only for 10 minutes at a time. Take time off without feeling guilty. Participate in pleasant, nurturing activities such as reading a good book, taking a warm bath, seeking and accept the support of others. Seek supportive counseling when you need it, or talk to a trusted counselor, friend, or pastor. Identify and acknowledge your feelings. You have a right to all of them. Change the negative ways you view the situations. Set goals. It's up to you. Thank you, Cassandra Taylor, founder for Top Flight Defense Incorporated.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. At this point, I'm looking on Facebook to see if there is anyone on Facebook that have any questions. But before we start sharing, I want to do the question and answer.
Sure.
And then once we do the sharing, then that's when I'll stop the Facebook Live and recording. So if there's anyone that have any questions that's in our Zoom call, unmute yourself and go right ahead. Nobody?
Hi, this is Karen. I was wondering, how long did you care for your parents? I love the idea that you had of, like, multitasking by having, your appointment, your doctor's appointment, the same time as your parents' appointment. I mean, going to the same doctor. Those are some really, really good suggestions. Thank you.
So in total, when I moved in with both of my parents in 2016 to start caring for them. But if I can honestly think back in my mind, I had been caring for my father probably since like 2010. And so it was a long journey. I think although 2010, I started taking care of my dad, he started having some other health issues. So I would say it was probably a good 10 years. My father passed in 2020. So I took care of my dad for a good 10 years. And then moving in with my mom, I took care of her for 5 years. I have it's not a funny story, but I had a story. My dad, when he was 77, was having a heart attack. He called my mother. He told my mother, he said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." He said, "Call Kim." And my mother said, "No, I'm going to call 911. He said, "No, call Kim." At the time, I was living in the suburbs. I drove from the suburbs. I picked my dad up. I took him to Mercy Hospital. At the time, when we got there, they said, "Mr. Dean," he said, "have you ever had a heart attack?" He says, "Well, no, I haven't." He said, "I hope I'm not having one." And indeed, my dad was in the middle of having a heart attack, but he did not want my mother to call 911. He insisted that my mother call me specifically. So my dad always trusted me to make sure that he was cared for. Always had.
You know what, Kim? It's like you said, it's a funny story, but it's not a funny story. I had two of those with my parents. My mom, we lived in the suburbs. I'll tell my suburb. My mom lived in Maywood, and I lived in Westchester. And I would go visit my mom every single day. And they were in their late 60s, early 70s. So no dementia or anything like that had set in. And I walked in the door, and my dad was gone. And I was talking to my mom, and she looked at me, and her eyes crossed. She started looking cross-eyed. And And I said, Mom, what's wrong with your eyes? And she covered her eyes and said, oh, San, you saw that? And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong? She said, well, it did it earlier today. And I was like, no, we're not playing. So I called, she was diabetic. So I called her doctor. They told me to take her into the ER. You know, my mom had a stroke. She had had a stroke, and if had I not noticed it, had I not said anything, she wouldn't have went. My dad didn't pay it any attention. And so that was the incident on my mom. So then on my dad, my mom called me. Like I said, they in Maywood, I'm in Westchester. And she said, come get your father and take him to the hospital. And I'm like, why? What's wrong with him? She said, his mouth swollen. He said it hurts, but he don't want to go. I drove over to Maywood. I looked at him and his jaw was swollen like he had a softball.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, get in the car. And he was like, what? I said, get in the car. We going to Hines because he's a veteran.
Yes.
Took him over to Hines. He had an abscess. And they said, had we not taken him in and it buzzed, he would have been, it would have poisoned him.
Set up sepsis.
So yeah, and so that's, I get what you're saying with our parents. It started a long time ago. It didn't just start when they got diagnosed with dementia. Okay, no one on Facebook has a question. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna end it on Facebook. I'm gonna stop the recording because I'm quite sure people would, there are some sharing that's more personable. So hold on one second. And this message, I'm thanking those that chimed in on Facebook Live. I want to say thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be back again on the end of June, fourth Wednesday in June, we'll be on with the Social Security Board. So thank you for joining us on Facebook Live.
Thank you.
Stop that. And now I am going to stop the recording.